Good morning. I thought they were not going to let the Baptist preacher give in the offering again. I come here and I said the last time I was here they didn't let me give in the offering. And that Baptist part of me says you got to give in the offering. Some of us might remember the commercials from years ago. I think it might have been an Alka-Seltzer commercial. It was one of those laxative type commercials where the guy says, "I can't believe I ate the whole thing." Remember that? And his wife says, "You ate it, Ralph." I think it might have been about indigestion or something like that. And I wanted to share with you that I've had some issues and around my bowels and stuff, and so I was sitting the other night and I was in some pain, and I was, like you would expect, not too happy about it. But then I thought about that and I said, you know what? I've been eating, and I have type 2 diabetes. So I have been eating like an idiot. I've had type 2 diabetes for a while. And I can remember buying a half gallon of ice cream and eating it in 2 days. And I like Snickers bars, and I would buy Snickers 5 or 6 times a week. And I said to myself, you know what? This is a blessing in disguise. Your body is telling you, you can keep doing that if you'd like, but I'm shutting down. And so I really mean that. I'm pretty honest about that, because now I've been forced by my body to exercise more self-discipline, moderation. So why would I say that? I'd say that because I know all of us have had instances where we've encountered things and we thought, oh, that's just horrible and it's the end of the world. And then we go a year later and we look back and go, wow, that wasn't so bad after all. And I had one of those aha moments the other night as I was sitting on my couch. Now, fellow, you're going to be a little bit more disciplined about what you eat and how you act. And I just gotten to where I would eat at night, and because I ate this steak. I'm not much of a steak eater, but I ate a steak in Canada. It's not a T-bone, but one of those really juicy steaks. And I started eating those at night and then going to bed and lying down on my right side. Is that counterintuitive or what? Because they tell you if you're going to do that, at least lie on your left side because the body digests it better. So my body just kind of said, okay, I got something for you. And it gave me a dose of that, and I think it's a good thing. I really do. I think that I am now at a place where I'm going to treat myself a little bit better than I have. Okay? So I wanted to announce that. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we all know about the political climate in this country right now. And we're on different sides of that spectrum. And sometimes I go on Facebook and I post things. I'm never vulgar, but I express my opinion about policies and individuals. And I was thinking last night, I said, well, maybe I shouldn't have posted that. And I've concluded this, that one of the things in life we have to get to where we're willing to do is to forgive ourselves. You have to forgive yourself for everything you've said and thought and done. It's one thing to regret something. It's another to wallow in guilt. Guilt does not serve us. It stagnates. It keeps us from moving forward. Guilt is not a friend. In my view, I can forgive myself, and you can forgive yourself too, because if you don't forgive yourself, you get stuck. And we are prone to say and do things that we later regret. And the best gift we can give ourselves is to forgive ourselves, because each and every moment is an opportunity to start anew. And those of us who don't think that you can forgive yourself and move on will remain stuck in that place. Guilt and fear from my belief system and my mentor are really the only fears of man. They're the greatest adversaries to our progress, guilt and fear. So I wanted to share that with you this morning. So I forgive me. And it really doesn't matter if you forgive me or not. I've forgiven myself. And that's what matters at the end. Can you forgive you? And move on. Okay? This morning I'm going to talk about something called the 5 steps to peace. And I want to begin by saying this. Henry David Thoreau, who's one of my favorite people, said this many years ago, that there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one digging at the root. I want to paraphrase that and say, there are thousands hacking at the branches of our dilemmas to maybe one digging at the root. And Dr. King said this, that we've learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, but we haven't learned to walk together like sisters and brothers on earth. Through our scientific and technological genius, we've made of the world a neighborhood. And now through our spiritual and moral genius, we must make of it a brotherhood, and I'll add sisterhood. And I believe that the living experience is not so much a process of discovery as it is a process of creation. It is not a process where we're learning and growing into so much as we're creating our reality. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. You can have an event occur and talk to 10 people and they all see it differently. They don't see it the same way. Because it is the way we look at the perspective from which we come that determines how we view something, how we view an event. Because we have that capability. We can decide how we want to view something. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as we look at history as it has unfolded, and we look at the things that are happening today in our world and even in our nation, we might ask ourselves the question, why is it that human beings take 2 steps forward and then a giant leap backward? And I submit this morning that there is a process that's taking place that allows for all of this. And I also believe that there are universal laws that are in place. And whatever you want to call the source of our existence, because the Big Bang is not the source, the Big Bang is an outcome. Something caused that. As one of my friends said, where there is a clock, there is also a clockmaker. And whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it the primal essence or God or goddess or Bill or Bob or Joe or Sam, It is what it is. And I believe that this source has provided universal laws that are in place. And that often what we see as some occurrence that is an outgrowth of some kind of moral retribution or some kind of moral consequence, what we're actually experiencing is one of those universal laws taking effect. And I believe that they're there to help us grow, to help us evolve. And on this tiny blue dot we call Earth, in the midst of trillions of other planets and solar systems and galaxies, we are, in terms of the universal clock, a very young species. We're seedlings. And our behaviors are indicative of the fact that there are certain things we have not yet fully embraced. And it is not so much a matter of what is right and wrong, because that's a moving feast. One culture might say this is right, and another says that's wrong. One individual might see something as acceptable, and another says no, that's wrong. It is not so much a matter of right and wrong as it is a matter of what works and what doesn't work. And we have to decide as a species what works for us, what promotes our collective good, what benefits us. Not right and wrong, because we get in these battles with each other over what's right and what is wrong. And we call each other names and we scream and shout at each other. But you're wrong. Is it so much a matter of right or wrong? Or must we ask ourselves the question, what serves us? We're a species that, from the bleached bones of civilizations and the wreckage of nations, have looked and we have recognized that there are things that do not work for us. What is it that we seek? We say we want certain things, but the question becomes, are we doing the kinds of things that will bring that about? If we were to interview or to take a questionnaire to everyone in this room, most of us would agree that, well, we want to live more in peace, we want to prosper, we want to enjoy life, we want to be treated fairly, we want to have compassion in our midst. But then we must ask ourselves, are we doing the things that will promulgate that? I was listening this morning to Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs was saying that one of the problems with the human family is that we think it is a weakness to negotiate with each other. We think it's a weakness to be diplomatic. And he was talking to a group that represented, I think, the European Union, and he was saying to them, whatever the case may be, we must get to the place where we understand that even if another human being disagrees with us, in order to live in this world in a way that works for all of us, we have to reach some point of agreement. We do not have to agree on everything. I think it was Tip O'Neill who said, if you agree with me some of the time, that's great. If you agree with me most of the time, I like that. But if you agree with me all of the time, something is wrong with you. We live in a world where we have to reach a place where we recognize what is so and stop ignoring what is so, and then begin to do what works Einstein put it this way: you cannot use the same energy that created a problem to try to solve it. Human beings do that on a regular basis. We think the solution to killing is to kill. We think the solution to violence is to add on more violence. You have a club, I get a bigger club, and we hit each other with those clubs, and we keep doing that over and over again. And Brother Einstein comes along and says to us again that if you keep doing the same things the same way over and over again, seeking a different outcome, that is called insanity. And we've engaged in it for much too long. Dr. King put it this way toward the end of his life. He said, somebody must have some sense in this world. Someone must say, enough is enough. This does not work. Warfare and blatant violence and our prejudices and our bigoted attitudes and our patriarchal arrogance do not work. We live in a world where there are more women than men. If they ever got together and got angry enough, men would be in trouble. It does not work. And we need to re-examine ourselves and look at what it is that drives what we do from its most basic or fundamental place. There's something called a paradigm. Paradigm is a particular way of doing things. And I think for our species, it is very much the case that there's a time when we need changes in our paradigms. There are things we must think about differently, and we must begin to behave in different ways. We say, many of us, survival is our instinct, prime instinct. I don't believe that. But even if that were the case, at the rate at which we are doing what we do with our repetitive behaviors, if survival is our instinct, it better kick in or we're going to be in trouble. Dr. King said again, we must learn to live together as brothers or we will perish together as fools. John Kennedy put it this way. He said, mankind must put an end to war or war will put an end to mankind. What works? Jesus said, it is recorded in one of his teachings, that no one having drank old wine straightway desireth new, because he thinks the old is better. But new wine must be put into new wineskins. And I believe what he was trying to tell those who were in his audience is that there are some things that you have been doing that no longer work. And again, it's not a matter of you were wrong and I'm right. It is a matter of perhaps you did not have enough data. To say something needs to be expanded upon does not make you wrong. It just suggests maybe the data was insufficient. And many of our ideological frameworks and our cosmologies and theologies and our pathologies and psychologies and sociologies are founded upon first instincts from our predecessors, and maybe it's time for us to examine those first assumptions and say, is it possible, just possible, that there are things we don't understand about life, the understanding of which would change everything? It is not to make our predecessors wrong, but to consider that the earth is not flat, to consider that the earth is not the center of the universe, to consider that germs are real, to consider that we're not the only ones in this vast, this immeasurable universe, to consider the possibility that there are some things that no longer work and that there are some things that need to be expanded upon. It is not to suggest that we throw everything away, but that we re-examine them honestly and say to ourselves, does this work? Or is there new data, new input that we must consider? 5 steps to peace. I'm looking for my glasses now. I bring them. Most of the time I don't wear them.
One thing I can do is find glasses.
Yeah, but I think, and I've got to start using them more. On September the 12th, 2001, and by the way, I'm a student of Neil Donald Walsh, the author of Conversations with God. And I'm going to be sharing with you from one of his latest books, What God Said. And this is an entry that he put in there. On September the 12th, 2001, I was besieged with emails from readers all over the world wanting to know how the messages of Conversation with God could help the world prevent a repeat of the horrific and terrifying events of the day before. We remember September the 11th, 2001, when the Twin Towers were attacked and hundreds of people perished. I went to my keyboard and began an urgent exchange with God. Here's the beginning of that exchange, verbatim. God, please be here. We need help. And he said, this voice said to him, I am here. We need help. I know. Right now, I understand. The world is on the brink of disaster, and I'm not talking about natural disaster. I'm talking about man-made calamity. I know. And you're right. I mean, humans have had disagreements before, and serious ones, but now our divisions and disagreements can lead not simply to wars, which are bad enough, but to the end of civilization as we know it. That is correct. You have assessed the situation correctly. You understand the severity of the problem. You simply do not understand the nature of the problem. You do not know what is causing it. So you keep trying to solve it at every level except the level at which it exists, which is the level of belief. The problem facing the world today is a spiritual problem. Your ideas about spirituality are killing you. You keep trying to solve the world's problems as if it was a political problem, or an economic problem, or even a military problem, and it is none of these. It is a spiritual problem, and that is the one problem human beings don't seem to know how to solve. Of course, I beg God, then tell us how to solve it. An entire book emerged as a result of this plea titled The New Revelations. And I consider the most important passage of that book to be that we are a species that needs changes in paradigm. We look at our belief systems and we have to examine them very carefully. The Bible says in the book of Deuteronomy, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them, when they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of his town. They shall say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a profligate and a drunkard. Then all the men of his town shall stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. Of course, no one today would seriously consider a purging for a son who in youthful disobedience of his parents occasionally over imbibes, right? Wrong. The maintenance of civil order in society rests on the foundation of family discipline. Therefore, a child who disrespects his parents must be permanently removed from society in a way that gives an example to all other children of the importance of respect for parents. The death penalty for rebellious children is not something to be taken lightly. The guidelines for administering the death penalty to rebellious children are given in Deuteronomy chapter 21, 18 to 21. Charlie Fuqua, 2012 candidate for Arkansas State House of Representatives, in his 2012 book, God's Law, The Only Political Solution. This is what a candidate articulated as a part of his platform. Mr. Fuqua was not elected. Apparently, some people are able to permit themselves to acknowledge that some of our old beliefs about God and about life are no longer working. Saeed Shahshuddin, a minister of education for the Taliban in the Middle East, may not, however, be one of those people. Asked why the Taliban declares that women need to be confined to home, he told the press, "It's like having a flower or a rose. You water it and keep it at home for yourself to look at it and smell it. It is not supposed to be taken out of the house to be smelled." In other words, a woman is a possession, a man's possession. These are the kind of ancient views that may come from politicians, you might say, but surely members of today's contemporary clergy, people who we hope will lead us and guide us as we seek to create a better life, are able to see when old views are no longer working. Well, not exactly. Women cannot handle power. It is not within them to handle power. The real and true power comes from God. And God is the one that gave man the power and the authority over the wife. Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, a popular Christian fundamentalist pastor, in his Sunday service webcast, How Liberal Women Are Building a Shameless Society. All he left out was that women need to stay at home, do the dishes, take care of the children, put supper on the table, handle the housework, and keep the laundry basket empty. Oh, and of course, perform her wifely duties for her husband. And so we see that even in our supposedly modern society, in this supposedly enlightened period, we continue to be confronted with the need to make determinations. Are some of our old ideas about God and about life no longer working? Or are these 2012 voices offering solutions that truly do and can work today, just as they did in 1412 or 1012? Or the year 12. What the first 5 steps to peace offer us is a way to answer these questions. Step 1. The first of those steps, noticing that some of our old beliefs about God and about life are no longer working, is without a doubt the biggest. So difficult is it for humanity as a whole to take this step that even a modest number of people doing so would create a revolution. Why is it so difficult? Because of where humanity's old beliefs come from in the first place. One of my life's most wonderful spiritual teachers, Dr. Terry Cole Whittaker, startled me one day years ago when she put a brilliantly insightful question to our congregation, of which I was fortunate to be a member. At a Sunday morning service, she said this: "Who would you have to make wrong in order to get life right?" Terry offered the observation that in order to avoid making our mother wrong, our father wrong, our favorite teacher wrong, our most hallowed spiritual messenger wrong, we will cling to what they told us, even if it is clearly no longer working, presuming it ever worked. She then invited us all to muster the courage to step out of our comfort zone and consider the possibility that what we assume to be true, given its apparently authoritative source, may not be true at all, or may be at least incomplete. That is, there may be more to know on the subject. It was Dr. Terry who ignited me to wonder, has evolution stopped? Did humanity cease to grow and to advance in its understandings of life during the time of my mother and my father? Or the time of theirs? Or during the time of our earliest teachers and messengers? And if so, exactly how far back need we go to find the stopping point? When precisely did spiritual evolution cease? Or is it possible, just possible, that within each new generation is born the capacity for the acquisition of new and even larger understanding? Put simply, is wisdom static or organic? People such as Dr. Terry take us by the hand and lead us to the edge of our comfort zone, promising us that they will be there for us in our moments of fear. It is these new teachers, as well as the old, who we do well to revere, for they lead the way to places yet untraveled by the largest number of us, taking steps into the unknown for us, and coming back to report to us what they have found. These are the finders of tomorrow. And always you can tell the true ones from the false. For the true ones, without fail, invite us to join them, not follow them, on life's most spectacular expedition, the journey of the soul. The work of Dr. Terry Cole Whitaker, for your information, may be accessed at www.terrycolewhitaker.com. The program she offers is titled Adventures in Enlightenment. Step 2. Once we get to a place where we can at least admit, and what I think I will do is go through the first 2 steps. There are 5 of them. But let's take a moment and reflect on step 1. In step 1, Neil tells us we must be brave enough, have the courage to say, maybe our predecessors were not wrong, but had insufficient data. Maybe there's more to this than we think or we thought. Maybe our sacred books and our sacred messengers had valuable things to teach us, but limited in their scope and understanding, did not give us every aspect or the fullest expression of those truths. Step 1 is to be willing to say, maybe we got some things incorrect. Maybe our ideas about who we are and who our source is not sufficient. The first step is be open to drink new wine. We're creatures of habit, and we follow the pathway of least resistance. We enjoy our comfort zones. But in order to grow, we must sometimes be shaken from our comfort zones. And as difficult as it is for some of us to embrace, maybe humanity has to continue to take 2 steps forward and 1 giant step backward to finally come to the realization that does not work. We look at things happening in our nation today. There are people who made certain political decisions who regret it now. And they're increasingly saying it in town hall meetings and different places. Maybe humanity is in a place where our evolutionary process requires that we keep going into the darkness in order to appreciate the light, when if we were more highly evolved, we would realize as the Jewish people to never forget the lessons that we've already been taught. The Jewish community says, lest we forget. When you enter into the Holocaust Museum, they post on the wall signs that say, we must never forget this. And when we look at what happened in other parts of the world, we're still forgetting those things that have already come before us. And we have the audacity, the hubris to say, in our repetitive madness, we're highly evolved. We say we care, and we're compassionate, and there's a degree of truth to that. But do we care enough in a world that has more than enough to feed its people, that 700 children die every hour from hunger? Do we care enough to begin to recognize that we're interdependent and interconnected, and what I do to you will eventually get back to me, because what goes around does come around? Because we are inextricably connected to some essence, whatever we want to call it, and there's only one of it. And it has multiplied and divided itself into a gazillion pieces. And it is the sum total of all of it. That is why there's a symbiotic relationship, and science tells us everyone and everything is connected. We give nitrogen to trees, plant life. They give oxygen to us. They eat what we give off as refuse. And oxygen is the refuse that trees and plants give off. We're interconnected. We're intertwined. They went to the moon a few years back and brought back some moon rocks. And scientists said, this stuff is made of the same thing you find here on Earth. Einstein put it this way: it all boils down to matter. And everything in existence is made of this matter, the same stuff. The law of the preservation of energy and matter is the same. You cannot destroy it. It takes on different forms. So much for our ideas about what we call death. Is it death? A cessation of existence? Or is it just a change of address? I'll say this, and I'll stop on step one. Maybe, Pat, I'll get a chance to come back and talk about the other 5 steps. Ultimately, one day we'll discover, we'll grow up, we'll evolve, we'll recognize that we're individuations of each other. That we're so tied together and so unevolved that we can't see it. That we're different expressions of the same thing. And out the window goes the notion of superiority and inferiority, because a thing cannot be superior to itself. You may push back against such a notion. And the beauty of life is that we have the option to do that. We can say, I don't believe that. I disagree. And I love it. Because what makes life is a triad rather than a dyad. It is not just up and down. It is up, down, and in between. It is not just black and white. It is black, white, and gray. Life has a gray area. And we must come to the place where we recognize that we are all tied together in a single garment of destiny, bound by an inescapable network of mutuality. And what affects one directly affects all indirectly. Because strangely enough, the way the universe is structured, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. And one day, we'll get to the place where we take this one step and we realize that what we're seeing is not so much adversarial things as we're seeing degrees of one expression. What do I mean by that? I mean this. Hot is not the opposite of cold. It is an expression. It is an expression of a degree of something. We call it temperature. It's the same thing in varying degrees. We're much more connected and have much more in common than we think. And those of us who can embrace this, and when we make errors, when we make mistakes, when we say things that we regret, forgive ourselves and move on. Because the process of evolution is ever forward and never backward.